of knowing me kind of well, but maybe not. For those of you who don't, I grew up a missionaries and pastor's kid. We lived in Tanzania, East Africa when I was little. Then we moved to New York City. My parents were home missionaries and church planters there. And now my family lives in Texas, and we plant churches and pastor in Houston. Over the course of my life, something I've been subjected to, as most people have, is death. Whenever I lived in Africa, I was too young to really remember it or even understand what was going on at the time, but it was more common to come across a person with AIDS as a person with a cold. I also remember living in New York City in 2001 whenever the Twin Towers fell. Thank the Lord, none of us were in Manhattan, but not everybody was so lucky. Even in our little church in Queens, we weren't able to escape it completely. Death was just everywhere in that city. But my family being who they are, doing what it did, the most common death I've come across in my life is spiritual death, both outside the church and in. People living like zombies, walking, talking, and laughing, but dead inside. Sometimes they know it, and sometimes they don't. I see people living like this all the time. I've lived like this, looking for life and sometimes even thinking you found it in things like schooling, religiousness, piety, morality, charismatic energy, in our relationships and community. But we're dying. About a year ago, I was going through a filing cabinet with all my great-grandfather's old sermons in them, and I came across a sermon about this. It's a sermon about death. So I'd like to read to you guys today an excerpt from this sermon. It's more like actually a series of excerpts from different spots in it. The sermon itself is an analogy and runs parallel to Luke 7:11 through 17, where Jesus comes across a widow and her dead son in a village named. I'd like to say about a sentence or two after the sermon is done. So to signify the sermon being over and me moving to myself speaking, I'll move to the front and left of the podium. So this is The Widow's Name by Morris Plotz. Death is a terrible thing. There's a certain odor in death, kind of stings the nostrils. You may not know, but spiritual death is just as real as physical. It's more awful, in fact, for the sake that it is eternal. During Jesus' time on earth, he had an encounter with death that right now stands out in my mind. So let our minds run freely on a spiritual parallel, or an analogy, as we discuss this incident. Please don't get offended. You might hear that I'm making thrusts at the churches. You do me an injustice for you to feel this way. To prove what I say, you'll notice I will try to be harder on mere religionists than on anyone else. I have a deep purpose running through what I first seemed to be more mere entertainment or ridicule. I don't want to ridicule anyone. And I want to respect each person's belief, even if I cannot accept it. But back to our analogy. In the village of Nain, a widow's only son has died. They're about to bury the poor man, which is all you can do with a corpse. But now let's do some supposing. Let's imagine the procession stopped by a group who simply will not settle for the young man being dead. Each person under the conviction that they may raise him to life again. Up first walks a wise man, a learned man, doctor of everything, B.A., LL.D., Ph.D. And the people say, "Widow, dry your eyes. Here's a man who can help you." His mind revels in flights of fantasy and masterful rhetoric. A marvel of metaphysical speculations. Why his books are in library shelves. He talks glibly about the subliminal regions of the mind, incarnation, fourth dimension, relativity, and so forth. He begins a lofty discourse while the people stand spellbound. Even the widow forgets to weep for a moment. He brings in an elaborate, up-to-date, streamlined theory of creation, willing to put even Darwin to shame. "Cosmic beginnings," he shouts. But the dead man's ears hear not a word. By and by, he runs down amidst there are a few things he doesn't know or understand, and leaves the scene bowing profusely to the widow, mumbling something about the mystery of death. There's value in learning and philosophy, yes, but be careful not to love it for what it cannot do. Knowledge cannot bring the dead to life, physical or spiritual. It has been characterized as a man looking in a dark cave at midnight for a black cat that isn't there. Up next comes a holy man, respected nationally for his piety and unswerving dedication to religion. "What a pity the man is dead," he says. "Bring out the prayer book, breviary." Suitable portions of the scriptures are read. The corpse reposes before the altars with flickering candles and the air heavy with incense. It is beautiful, impressive. One is to go away deeply impressed by the elaborate ritual. Tears are there, but the man sleeps on. Religion can't save any more than a mouse might conquer a lion. The man is dead, a corpse. We have a world filled with corpses, dead in sin with foul odors of the tomb. Churches filled with corpses, never been born again. Ushers looking more dead than alive. Corpses preaching, corpses singing. Highly paid and highly trained corpses singing special songs. Corpses taking offering on Sunday morning. Now a reformer comes on the scene. Again the procession stops, people beginning to wonder if they might ever get their man buried. Halt, he cries, don't bury the poor man. Listen to me. What he needs is reform. He proceeds to lecture the dead man and shout his ears that he's not useful to society that way. Lying there like that, he's a blight and breaking his mother's heart. You must sign the pledge that you won't die anymore. You'll promise you will not be a stiff corpse on the way to the grave anymore. He takes a button and pins it on his shroud, showing now he belongs to Temperance League and Reformed Society. He shoves a pen in his hands and by considerable effort moves the fingers to scrawl a name and pledge that he will no longer be a corpse. But he is dead. Reform won't save, won't bring anyone out of spiritual death. Vote out booze, get rid of cigarettes, rid the world of drugs. A better world, admittedly, but it will never save the soul. Up next comes I, Plotz, the charismatic Pentecostal evangelist, waving me arms like a windmill. Shout, jump, I scream. What's the matter with you? Are you all the way backslid? Shout, I tell you. Clap your hands, stamp your feet, do something. But the man sleeps on. You see, hooking up an electric wire to a corpse demands some convulsive movement in the limbs that looks like life. No matter how much energy you send coursing through its veins, no matter how it hops, pops, jumps, and shouts, it's good as dead. Another preacher says, that won't do, you'll have to entertain him. Bring him to my church. We have pool rooms in the basement. A Saturday night dance and plenty of oysters in the summer, and strawberries in the summer. Will be won back to life when he gets in with a crowd like that. But he is dead. The widow weeps on. Then comes Jesus from Nazareth, and he came and touched the bier and said, Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he sat up and began to speak. I've heard it said that the church is dead and that we are dead. I think it's time that we begin to depend on the only person who can give us life again.